Father, here's a question. This comes from Hausner, great name, by the way, in Maine. And he says this: Father Elias, I hear a lot about St Maximillian Kolbe in Poland, but what can you tell us about his time in Japan? In Jesus through Mary, Hausner.
Well, Hausner, I should be able to answer this question since I've been to Japan twice now and visited Mogenza no Sono, where St. Maximilian Kolbe founded his friary there. And many people, as they don't realize that St. Maximilian Kolbe did go to Japan in 1930. From 1930 to 1936, he went to the Nagasaki area, the southern part of Japan, and established his second Niepakalana, or his City of the Immaculate, which he called Mogenza no Sono, or Garden of the Immaculate. And he went with 4 friars at first. And the amazing thing about it is that when he arrived there in Japan, even to this day, the port where the ships arrive, as soon as you get off the ship, you see the cathedral at the top of the mountain there, or on the top of the hill, with Our Lady with her arms outstretched. And he even writes that he says that Our Lady was there to welcome him as he came into Japan, to Nagasaki. And he established his friary there, not far from the port. His first friary was actually next to, believe it or not, as you know, St. Maximilian Kolbe was working for the conversion of the Freemasons, and the first building or house that he rented was next to the oldest Western-styled architectural building in Japan, and was built by the first Freemason who came to Japan. So his house was next door to this Freemasonic house or structure, and St. Maximilian Kolbe lived there for a year, and that's where he printed his first publication. After only being in Japan 30 days, he was already printing his Night of the Immaculata magazine in Japanese, with the help of native Japanese speakers, with some Buddhist monks, some seminarians. And the beautiful thing was he knew Latin, so he could talk to the seminarians in Latin, and they could get other native Japanese speakers to help set the type. So after being in Japan only a month, he was already printing, which is amazing. And then eventually the friars themselves learned how to set all the Japanese characters and print publications. And his friary is still there, in Mogenza no Sono in Nagasaki. But he moved from that location, which is near the first cathedral where the Japanese first revealed themselves after being in hiding for 200 years. You know, the church went underground because of persecution. From that spot, he moved then. He was looking for property where he should build his permanent place for his City of the Immaculate in Japan. And people told him, well, build it next to Urakami Cathedral. And he said, no, I don't. Our Lady doesn't want it there. Some people said that he even had this foreboding or prophetic insight that it somehow there was going to be a fire that was going to destroy the area, but I'm not sure about it. But anyway, Our Lady was telling him not to build it there. Instead, he built it on the side of this hill, Mount Hikosan, where he built on the side of this hill. And the people said, why are you building it on the side of a hill? He said, that's where Our Lady wants it. But anyway, when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, of course, ground zero was Urakami Cathedral, where if he would have had his friary established there, it would have been incinerated, because in an instant, 8,000 of the 12,000 Catholics of that parish were killed in 1 second, you might say, or 30 seconds. And his friary that was built on the side of the hill was protected from the blast and was never harmed by the blast. But he didn't live in Nagasaki at the time of the nuclear bomb. Of course, he left in 1936 because he was called to come back to Japan, to Poland. But many people, as one of his own friars, when he arrived in Japan, said, it's amazing. He said when Saint Francis Xavier arrived in Japan, he arrived in the vigor and strength of health to evangelize the Japanese. But my superior, Saint Father Maximilian, arrived with a fever and sick. All the while that he was in Japan, St. Maximilian Kolbe really suffered from, of course, he had half of a lung because he had tuberculosis as a young man. So he had half of a lung. His health was never very good after he had tuberculosis. The food was not good for him. He couldn't stand the Japanese food. It was hard on his digestion. And so many times you have to walk up these steps because everything in Japan is like on a mountainside or on a hillside. So you'd have to walk with this half of a lung up these steps. And many times you'd have to stop halfway up the steps and take a breath and get a rest, then get to the top and take a rest. Then he'd have to go into the church because the bishop wouldn't let him say Mass in his friary. He had to go to the church to say Mass. And the friars recount that sometimes they had to support him under his arm so he could say Mass without falling over. So it's amazing how he was able to do all that he did. You know, a person who's well couldn't accomplish as much as he did, and he was a sickly man, and he had a fever most of the time. And I think of times when I've had a fever that it's even hard to concentrate, yet he was writing articles, he was doing correspondence, he was, of course, directing the friars. They even built a grotto in honor of Our Lady of Lourdes there up the mountainside, and you can go there and pray at this Lourdes grotto that St. Maximilian Kolbe's friars built. And he used to walk up that steep hill to pray the rosary every day when he had the opportunity and when his health permitted. So he must have made a sacrifice to do that, because seeing how his lungs were so decimated, that must have been quite a challenge for him to walk up hills and things like that. So he spent 6 years in Japan, and that's where he also was promised. Our Lady told him that he would go to heaven. So he told the friars later on when he was in Poland that while in Japan, Our Lady gave him a grace to know that he would go to heaven, and that he was promised heaven, so that he was given that special grace to know that he would die soon and that he would go to heaven. So he had that special grace given to him in Japan. It's interesting that the Lourdes Grotto in Nagasaki is so famous that even the secular water bottle company puts the image of Our Lady of Lourdes on their water bottles. I thought for a moment when I saw it, I thought, is this holy water or Lourdes water? But it's just drinking water, like we have, Poland Springs or something like that. They have the image of Our Lady of Lourdes from his shrine there on water bottles that you can buy in Nagasaki and drink.